Okay. Shalom.
Hello. Hi, Krishna.
Great. Are we ready to go?
Yes, we are ready to go.
Okay. All right. Well, as before, let's do a little bit of meditation just to calm the mind, forget about what happened in the past, stop planning the future, and just be in the moment. So let's do a few moments of breathing. And now to set our motivation, to think that right now there's so much suffering in this world. And at this point, we have the great opportunity to practice Buddhist psychology, to utilize it so as to become familiar with generating more love, compassion, and the wisdom to understand, wisdom understanding emptiness. So may this, therefore, today become one of the causes for us to become fully enlightened. That is to activate our deepest potential of limitless love, compassion, and wisdom, to be of the greatest benefit to ourselves and others. Try to really feel this from the depth of your heart while we recite the prayers, Refuge and Bodhicitta. Sorry. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then the four immeasurables. So now, having turned my mind towards Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, in particular towards the Dharma, that is Buddhist psychology, and having generated the wish to become fully enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. Now, with the next words, we're putting into practice this aspiration, this wish to become a Buddha, by wishing for all sentient beings to be happy and so forth, and not just wishing to do so, but also generating the determination, I will bring this about. So with each line, I'll take a break and you have time to briefly reflect on it. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay, great. Thanks, Shir. All right. Well, I'll try to put this lamp up here, but it keeps falling off, so I'll just switch it off. Before we start, I want to share something with you. Well, as last time, I'd like to also mention a few things that Geshe mentioned, because he gives such beautiful explanation, and I think it's closely connected to what we're doing here. So just to kind of briefly bring it into what we're doing. But also I'd like to share something with you. I watched a documentary that some of you may have heard of it. I think it's called The Altruism Revolution. It's a movie that was made in France, I think, by a channel called Arte or something. Anyway, it's a beautiful documentary. It talks actually, I think, about the basics of Buddhism. As the word already, as the title implies, altruism. So altruism, the German word for that is being selfless, being altruistic, but not selfless as in selflessness, but putting yourself to the side and be there for others, putting others' welfare before one's own welfare. So, of course, closely connected to compassion, the wish for others to be happy, the wish to remove other suffering. So this is a documentary. I don't think it's that long. It's available in English. I looked it up. I watched it in Germany, so I watched it in German. And it talks a lot about meditation. Matthew Ricard plays a role in the movie, Richard Davidson, the neuroscientist. But the main message of this movie, of this documentary, which I thought was so impressive, it was so striking, for me at least, how it explained that our basic nature is compassion. Our basic nature is to be altruistic. And it presented experiments that established that prove this. And His Holiness has mentioned some of those, but the experiments they used here are not the ones that His Holiness usually mentions. But still, Emory University was involved. There's one Dutch, I think, professor working at Emory. He's also explained His Holiness some of the other experiments. But here, the experiment they did, which I thought was very interesting, they took little children and they showed them dolls, well, like stuffed animals. And they had two dogs, one with the yellow trousers and one with wearing yellow trousers, one wearing blue trousers. and another dog trying to open a box. Okay, so they were like finger puppets and looking like dogs. So the little child sitting on its mom's lap was watching these dogs interacting. And so there was a white dog that was trying to open a box, and the dog with the yellow trousers was helping the dog with trying to open the box, just assisting it. And then the whole scene was shown again, and this time the blue dog, I mean the dog with the blue trousers, was trying to stop the white dog, was hindering it, was stopping it from opening the box. And so the child was shown this scenario, and later on was asked to choose which dog it preferred. And in most cases, they showed it again and again, they wanted the dog that was helping the other dog. So it was quite interesting. They showed some other things, but that's the one I remember right now. So this is also mentioned little cartoons that children watch. And also, they showed something else that's really beautiful. The slightly older kids, when they were just in a room and an adult dropped something, and the adult was reaching for the thing that they dropped, the child right away ran there, picked it up, and gave it back to the adult. Just simple things. And they even chose a situation where the child was really busy with this bowl bath, where they were kind of very happily doing their thing, and something fell off the table, and again the child ran to pick it up. Anyway, so the point is they were showing that there is this compassionate nature that children have, and that is one of the main Buddhist ideas, that our nature is that of compassion. As Holmes mentions it again and again and again. Every talk, basically, he talks about it just for us to become more familiar with this, that this is our basic nature. But the question, of course, that arises is why don't we, why is that compassion not always there? Well, it is there sometimes, but it's very limited. It comes through towards certain people we possibly don't know, or the ones we're really, really close to. But it doesn't come through on many other occasions when it's really necessary for it to be there. And so it reminded me of something when his Holiness talks about, when he starts most of his talks, he starts off with saying, we're all the same in wanting to be happy and not to suffer. And then he talks about our basic nature being compassion. And in this documentary, they ask the same question: how come that we lose this ability, that as children, these children, they don't differentiate between race, etc., like the person, what religious background they have. If someone drops something to the ground, they run to help. Or in that scenario with the dogs, it disturbs them that, well, they choose the dogs that is kind and that's compassionate. Then they showed something else. They had this theory: when the child identifies with an object, kind of just creates this discrepancy, like this duality, like me, we, and them, whether the compassion changes. And so they did this very simple trick. They took some cereal, two types of cereal, and they asked the child to choose the kind of cereal that they preferred. And they all had their preferences. So the one they didn't like, the other one they did. And probably through their parents, the people doing the experiments, they knew about it. So anyway, they had these two bowls in front of them. And then one of the dogs that was previously shown to them, or, well, probably in a different scenario, like maybe a different child, I don't know. But they made sure that these were neutral enough, these experiments. So they showed a dog eating the same cereal as the child, and then the same case as before, the one dog trying to open the box, and now the dog that ate the same cereal as the child, that preferred the same cereal as the child, it was hindering the white dog in the center. It was the red one, and the blue one. One was helping, one was hindering the white dog to open the box. So the blue dog again tried to hinder the white dog from opening the box, but it was the one that preferred the same cereal as the child. and went on and on about saying how great that cereal was previously to that. And now this time the child chose the dog, the blue dog. And so the theory was the child had connected to this dog, like we are the same, we like the same cereal. In that case, but bizarre. So we like the same thing. And this time it didn't matter that this dog was hindering the white dog from doing something, because they had something in common and it identified with that. And that comes down to the idea we have a sense of I and others because of our misapprehension of reality. So we see a self that is merely labeled to not just merely labeled, but to be a real separate entity that separates me from everything else. So my I is not just labeled on the basis of mind and body, which are very closely connected to everything else around me. In fact, my mind and body couldn't be what they are right now if it wasn't for others. But that's not how it appears. There's a strong sense, I'm here. There's this solid I, not just labeled based on what my mind does or my body does. No, there's a solid objective I, and therefore me being here, you are there. So this dualism has been created. And from that dualism, from that notion of I'm here, you are there, now my whole world is divided into you are part of me. If you have the same interests, the same likes, the same dislikes, it becomes me versus others. And it depends on the situation. Sometimes it's just me against the rest of the world. Sometimes it's us, 2 or 3 people I have something in common with against the rest. And so like, dislike, don't care, have nothing in common with them. That then leads me to not being able to display that compassion, but rather to have attachment, anger, and be indifferent towards others. Because that sense of me and others, that strong sense of a permanent, a solid I, and a sense of separation from everything else. Okay. And when his holiness always says we have one thing in common, so even though we have that sense, we have that wrong apprehension with regard to solid I and solid others, etc., well, until we reach the understanding that that is not in accordance with reality, what also helps us to understand that we have something in common with everyone. That no matter what cereal we like and what kind of hummus we prefer, and whether we live in this country or that country, follow this religion, that, whatever, we have one much deeper thing in common, which is we all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. So in order to trigger this nature we have, this nature of compassion, if we truly understand, of course, if we understand selflessness, emptiness, compassion will naturally start to evolve, to come through. But that's difficult. Until we get there, if we think about this again and again, that all sentient beings just want to be happy and don't want to suffer, and really take this to a different level, to a deeper level, then whenever we see someone, we're not concerned with what they like, what they dislike. We're not concerned with the differences, but with this very deep level of connection. Okay, so I don't know whether you see it the same way, but this movie, this documentary really affected me, because I feel very strongly that it addressed exactly those 2 points. Our mind is in the nature of being loving and compassionate, but because of our misapprehension, which is not in the nature of our mind, which can be removed, we draw this distinction between I and others, me and them, we, them, and therefore compassion cannot fully come through, and therefore we suffer. We suffer because of our sense of self that we always have to protect, that need to be worried about. We need to be worried about that which is mine, my family, my etc. So when we say our existence is in the nature of suffering, there's nothing wrong with this world. This world is samsara and nirvana both. But our experience of that is one of samsara. It's in the nature of suffering, because we cannot be truly We can't truly let go and just be and just experience true contentment. Okay. Now, having said, having said all that, of course, here, the sutra we are studying here, deals explicitly with how I exist, you exist as a person, analyzing first the person, and we've done that, and then analyzing the bits and pieces that make us a person, the body, the different types of mind. And then from then onwards, as you'll see as we continue with the sutra, the objects around us, the way we perceive them, the Four Noble Truths, etc. All this is being addressed. Right now, we're dealing with the hardest part. We're dealing with the most difficult part of the sutra. And Geshe-la's explanation is so beautiful, which is why I'd like to bring that in. So just to remind you, so initially, of course, we start off when we recite the sutra to visualize the scenario. Geshe-la did beautiful visualizations. The way he explained it, well, you visualize the Buddha in front of you, these great beings, and though they are just visualizations, but they're very useful tools. And I also mentioned the scientific basis for that, where scientists have found that visualization can be very, very healthy, can help us a lot to transform our mind. But besides that, from a Buddhist point of view, these visualizations can inspire us. And as Geshe-la says, they help us to overcome our ordinary view of things. So he mentioned, for instance, you have all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you, and your parents are right there. And no matter how difficult your relationships are with them, well, visualize they're there, and you want to repay their kindness and just leave behind all the crap that we usually are involved in. So right now, to tap into this deepest nature of our mind and to visualize as a tool for that, to visualize, in the case of the Heart Sutra, you visualize you're in that sacred space. You're with the Buddha, with Buddha Shakyamuni, with Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Shariputra. And if you want to visualize all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you, there's no harm, again, as a way of being inspired by them having done something that we can all do, because we are the same basic nature. And now the dialogue starts between, well, first of all, we explain the place is explained, the audience is explained, and Buddha himself, as an example, is in absorption, in meditative absorption. And now Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara start their dialogue in the sense that, well, Shariputra just asks a question, how to practice the profound perfection of wisdom. And in response to that, Avalokiteshvara gives this really profound answer, explicitly talking about emptiness and implicitly talking about also the methods that, besides emptiness, the emotional states of mind that we need to generate in order to then go through the levels of a bodhisattva and become fully enlightened. Okay. Now, I don't like to rush it because emptiness, there's just so much to say about it. And to mention just a few things that Geshe-la talks about it. So I'd like to bring this in. One aspect, of course, we should not neglect compassion. Anything we do, Geshe-la basically said, he literally said, compassion is the basic fabric of Buddhism. So compassion should be like whenever we practice, and hopefully we can do it all day, but of course we forget sometimes, we're busy with other things, afflictive emotions arise, but to try and familiarize ourselves, to habituate ourselves to always find back to Buddhist practice. That's why we take refuge in the morning. Taking refuge in the morning is just setting the mind towards the whole day. Basically, like when I say I take refuge in the Dharma, in other words, I'm saying, all right, I find there are certain aspects of the Dharma that are helpful, certain aspects of Buddhist psychology I find helpful. So now me taking refuge this morning I'm trying to remember throughout the day those Buddhist psychological ideas, this Buddhist psychology, the aspects I personally find helpful at this point in time, so that when problems arise, when certain situations arise, I don't deal with them in a way that can be disruptive, getting angry, fighting, etc., but rather apply Buddhist psychology in an effective way. This is, in my opinion, what refuge means. Why do you take refuge? Why say it all the time? Saying those words just helps us to mentally think, I'm moving towards, I'm directing my mind, my whole being towards, well, the Dharma as in like Buddhist psychology. And the Buddha is the one who taught it, so indirectly also towards the Buddha, and of course the Sangha who are practicing and who can assist me and inspire me, but mainly towards Buddhist psychology, so that I don't just sit there and think, oh, Buddhist psychology is great, I love it, and end of story. No, to implement it in my daily life, to bring it into my own life. Maybe I start with just a few minutes of meditation in the morning and I forget about it the whole day. And then I do my 5 minutes in the evening and I remember, oh yeah, I'm actually practicing Buddhism. Okay. Initially, that's how it is. But then more and more, your mind becomes entrenched in this psychology. And whether you want to call yourself a Buddhist or not, who cares? And His Holiness also talked about it this morning. He was it this morning? Yeah, he said this morning, if you were there when he met these students from Southeast Asia, he said, get together with people from different religions and exchange yourself. And whether you believe in God, who cares? That's your own personal matter. So what you do, it doesn't matter. Just get together with other people. But also in this case, well, practice what you find helpful. Take the bits you find helpful. Whether you follow another religion, it doesn't matter. His Holiness even went as far on Sakadawa that he said you can take the Bodhisattva vow no matter what your beliefs are. So that was quite unusual. He said, well, if you're a Christian, he was like, for a moment, he was like, well, I guess it's all right. It's okay. Whatever your beliefs are, you can take the Bodhisattva vow. So the point is here, therefore, you don't need to take on the religion. You don't need to take on, call yourself this, that, and the other. The point is you bring your mind towards the direction of the Dharma. So you take refuge to remind yourself, I try to find a solution in the Dharma, which is the solution is based on nonviolence, compassion, and wisdom. Therefore, everything you do should have, any Buddhist practice you do should have as its basis compassion. And he stressed this beautifully. He said nowadays many people practice emptiness, shamatha, dzogchen, mahamudra, like these fancy exotic practices. They're great. They're of course they're very precious practices. But sometimes it's a bit like, oh, they're exotic, they're cool, they're I'd like to do something more advanced because I've been a Buddhist for and so forth, been a Buddhist for a while. But is compassion there? Do I have compassion? Am I doing these practices motivated by compassion? So that's a beautiful way to always check, is my practice really the practice of Buddhist psychology? And he cites the verse that His Holiness also mentioned on Sakadawa, when His Holiness talked about the verse at the beginning of Chantakirti's entry into the middle way, when he pays homage to compassion, great compassion, using the metaphor of a bountiful crops. So first you need a strong seed. That's compassion. Okay, so we have the seed of compassion already within us. We naturally have compassion. Now we need to just increase it. We need to increase it. And we can, even if we haven't realized emptiness yet, because we have that seed, we can actually make this compassion grow stronger before we generate an understanding, before we have the wisdom realizing emptiness. And great compassion is basically the wish for all sentient beings to be happy, and may I be able to make that happiness. May I be able to lead sentient beings to that happiness. That's basically great compassion. And initially, it's like a seed, and it is the basis for bodhicitta, of course, the mind that wants to become enlightened for all sentient beings. Then, therefore, it's like a seed. Then, when you have planted the seed, now you need to add water for the seed to grow. So, in other words, you need to strengthen your compassion for it to grow, for your bodhicitta to grow, for your love, for your care, your loving kindness to grow stronger. You need to again and again meditate on compassion. So compassion is therefore important at the beginning when you plant the seed, when you start off with firstly generating great compassion. Then it's important as you continue, as you keep practicing, you need to deepen it, you need to strengthen it. And in the end, so like water, like you add water to a seed, it's important like this, like the water. And in the end, it's like the harvest you get. Now, even when you're a Buddha, you have this incredible compassion that's even stronger than before. It's become so strong that now this compassion drives you to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so this is why, despite us studying the Heart Sutra, compassion should be our basis. Do we really have the wish, may other sentient beings be happy? So strong that their happiness is more important than my own. If we're honest, of course, we can have our moments, but to say that this is our default state, I guess, difficult at this point. But through habituation, again and again, I know from my own experience, I have a compassionate moment and I think, I just want it to be like that forever and I don't want it to go. But of course it goes again, because this takes time. It comes, there are a few moments and there are days that it works well, and then strong selfishness comes through again, just because of the force of habituation. So we need to keep doing it. We need to keep going. As Geshe says, there'll be a lot of obstacles. As His Holiness said this morning, no great person reached their great goals without a lot of obstacles. So obstacles are part of it. The greater your goal, the greater your obstacles. Okay, so in other words, it's not going to be easy, but it's a matter of hanging in there. Just let's do it. What else is there to do? What is more meaningful than doing that? And we can still live the normal life. I'm often accused of not living the normal life. Like monks and nuns don't live the normal life. Trust me, it's pretty normal. It's pretty ordinary. We have our ordinary problems. No bad hair days, that's gone. But other issues, problems like routine problems with other people. We don't live in a family, but we live in a monastic community where, though you have your own room, you pick up your food, there are people all around that you haven't chosen to live with. So it's a normal life, normal routines, and it's just a matter of making the effort to bring the Dharma into your daily life. And I sometimes meet lay people and I think, oh, they're much better Buddhists than myself. So I'm definitely aware that I'm not a good practitioner, that there are a lot better practitioners, that just being a monk or nun doesn't mean that someone is a better, well, that you have to be a monk or nun to practice well. There's so many lay people who are incredible practitioners. Anyway, having said all that, now we've come to the point where, well, we need to have the foundation of compassion, very important. So to check again and again, am I having the basics? And if not, try to generate it. And it lingers, even though you generate it before every class, before every Buddhist activity, you try to generate it. And even though it doesn't remain with you for that long, it lingers and it affects your understanding of, for instance, emptiness. Because those two, compassion and wisdom, go hand in hand. They support each other. Now, coming back to wisdom, this aspect, what we are learning here, we talked about the person. So Geshe did this meditation with you on Friday, where he asked you just go through your body. Where is the eye? Skin, what else? Bones, blood. Where is the eye? Can it be found? Where is the eye in the mind, etc.? So he asked just for you to search the eye. Of course, in the end, nothing to be found. So this is exactly what this sutra is also talking about, when it says also the five aggregates lack inherent existence. So implying, well, the I cannot be found, but look at what makes you you. What are you made of mind and body? Now, is there a true body, some inherent, some solid body based on which now you impute the I? Because that would be the idea we could generate. First, we may understand, okay, the I is merely labeled on the basis of a certain body and a mind. But the mind and the body, they exist truly. They're not just labeled, they're really there. The I is just labeled. That's another misapprehension. It's one of those levels that initially, all right, there's a strong sense of a solid I, but initially, then at some point we get a sense, oh, that can't be there. There can't be such a solid I. But there's a strong sense the body and the mind, they're truly there. And then, of course, the subtle mind, oh, it's kind of subtle, kind of difficult to understand. That must be something truly there. And then the subtle energy, the subtler, the easier. The subtler, it's not easier, sorry. The subtler, the more we have the tendency to believe, oh, that was real, there must be really something there that serves as a basis, some essence. So the best means to overcome that is to now analyze the basis of imputation. If the I is merely labeled based on what my body does, I label I on the basis of my hands, for instance. I'm saying I'm moving around. I move because my hands are moving or my head is moving. I say I meditate on the basis of a particular mind meditating. Okay. But now the basis of imputation, the basis is the mind in the case of meditating, or the body in the case of saying I move. All right. But how about mind and body? So do they exist inherently? And as the text clearly explains, no, they don't exist inherently. The body, where does my body start and where does it end? Where is exactly my body? If you just go on a subtle level, on a molecular, that is an atomic or an atomic level, which atom is part of my body and which isn't? Very difficult to determine. That which appears so solidly and easily definable, that's my body, that's his or her body. But if I go to a deeper level, where does mine start and where does another person's end? Hard to determine, right? And also, I made 99% of space. I mean, scientifically, if you just look at the, like, wow, there's not that much solid entity there, although it appears that way. And what makes it my body? If the I cannot be found, how come it is my body? And what makes a body? Where's the body within the body, other than me just calling it a body? So all these are ideas that are presented in here that we need to think about. We've already done it in the past and we'll continue doing this. But then, having left behind the body, we're now with the mind, and the mind is harder to understand. And Geshe did a beautiful job on Friday. I've not been able to go through Saturdays yet. I was a little busy, but I went through his teachings on Friday, and he did a beautiful job to talk about the mind and explain it in a very effective way, which I'd like to just address some of the ideas again. He did this meditation in particular. So this meditation I find was so helpful. And what he stressed was, well, with other objects, external objects, it's relatively easy to make other people understand these objects when they don't know them, because we have a lot of words, the meaning of which we're all familiar with. So if I talk about a certain type of food you've never eaten, I can talk about the ingredients of the food, the color of the food. So you know what I'm talking about. But if I talk about the mind, not about the brain, but about the mind, what am I going to say? It's clear and knowing. It's like, what? What are you talking about? What does that actually mean? It's clear, it's knowing. You know, I can describe a plate of hummus 1,000 times better than I can describe my mind of anger or what have you, right? Just because we're not used to it, we're not used to taking the mind, to become aware of our own awareness. We're not used to that. Why not? Because we're so used to being aware of the objects of the mind. We're so aware. What did Geshe say? We crave the objects of the mind. We crave them. We're so used to just seeing beautiful sights and hearing nice sounds and having pleasant tastes and pleasant tangibility, not too hot, not too cold, not too scratchy, it should be smooth, etc. So we are very familiar with the objects of the mind, but we're not familiar with the mind itself. Now, this familiarity can be, to a certain degree, of course, studying about the mind will help us. We generate some idea what the mind is all about, but you'll probably notice before long, you visualize your mind to be something material. Because the examples that I used, a mirror, right? Those are metaphors. Of course, they have to be used because we're so familiar with material things. So we say it's like a metaphor. It's like the space. It's like endless space. It's luminous like light, clear light, mind, right? So we use words that help us. They help us to bring us closer to what is actually meant. However, to really understand what is meant, we need to generate mindfulness of our own mind. In other words, meditate on our own mind. And the way Geshe did it was so beautiful with the flower, the blue flower. I actually organized a red flower. Oh yes, here it is. I got a red flower. I got it from my mom. It's not real. It's just a fake flower. I like that it's red because it's easier to visualize. The difference between the green and the red is more pronounced. Blue and green, they're so similar to a certain degree. I don't know many blue flowers. So anyway, I got this flower, prepared that. And so if I ask you, it's even easier if I show it to you, and then I ask you, close your eyes and think of the red flower I've just showed you, right? Even without you closing your eyes, you can do it. Just think of the red flower I just showed you, okay? So you see, initially it was there. It did appear to your sense consciousness. However, it's not a flower. I think it's a real flower, okay? But it was a real flower. So this red rose, if you think about it now, although it's not appearing on your screen, it appears to your mind, doesn't it? You can just nod, it appears, right? Okay, you can think of the flower or any other object, it appears to your mind. So that shows the appearance is somewhere. You are aware of an appearance, right? You are aware of an appearance. So there must be something to which the flower appears. Geshe called it a surface. Surface is again a physical expression. It implies something physical, but of course we have no choice because we lack those words, and even if we had words, they would not mean what they actually refer to. So we borrow these words from physical objects. Geshe talked about a surface. That's not the brain. The flower does not appear to your brain. Your brain is very active in firing away, the neurons firing away as you think about this flower. In fact, as scientists have found, when you see a flower and when you think about a flower, the same area in the brain is active. Okay, so if you think about playing tennis, similar areas, well, almost the same areas in your brain are active versus seeing the flower. Oh, by the way, when you have a compassion, that's also in the documentary. When another person suffers and you watch that suffering and you have compassion, the same area in your brain is highlighted as if you were to experience the suffering yourself. So it's quite interesting, but that's a different matter. Okay, that's just about compassion. But to go back to the appearance of the flower, so yes, your brain does something, but we're not talking about the brain here. No one denies the fact that when we see a flower, something happens in the brain. When we think about a flower, something happens in the brain, but we're not interested in the brain. Yes, we accept that, but we're interested in something else. we're interested in, first of all, the appearance of the flower. We know from our own experience that that takes place. There is an appearance. And not only is there an appearance of the flower, if someone asked us, is the flower red? Is the flower green? What is the color? We can answer correctly, which means that there is something that not only has the appearance of the flower, but also knows, is able to say something or knows something about the flower. Now that entity is labeled as mind. That's the mind. Okay? So it's not some lump that's somehow like a spaceship moving through our body and sometimes in our brain, etc. No, it's an entity, it's an agent. It does something, as Geshe uses the word agent. It does something. How does it do something? Things appear to it, and it can know those things. And an entity that does that has something appear to it, and it can know what appears to it, that we call mind. That's called mind. So we label mind on the basis of an object and that which is done with the object. So you have these three aspects: agent, object, activity. And those are labeled based on each other. Okay? So you label an agent based on an object, on an activity. Okay? All right? So on an object and an activity. You label, in the case of the mind, an object, the appearing object, being known by that mind, by something being known. Based on that, we talk about the mind. So we label mind. The object is also labeled based on a mind perceiving it. Okay. And also with regard to the relationship between agent and object, there, based on that, we label an activity, being aware of something. Okay. So those three are very important: object, agent, and activity. Although they lack intrinsic existence, they don't exist truly, they're just labeled based on each other, they still function. So although phenomena lack inherent existence, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in his Praise to Dependent Arising, although phenomena don't exist inherently, but agent, object, and activity are still tenable, they're still possible. In fact, they're only possible because they don't exist inherently. Okay, so mind is empty, emptiness is mind. Our mind lacks inherent existence. It doesn't exist truly and independently as some solid empty entity existing in and of itself. No, based on an action, based on an appearance, we merely label mind. Based on certain moments in time, based on an object, something that is done with the object, and being aware of knowing the object, therefore we label mind. And because it is merely labeled and doesn't exist in and of itself, it can exist. So emptiness is the mind. And the lack of inherent existence of the mind is not separate from the mind. Mind is not other than emptiness. But still, they're nominally different. Emptiness is not other than the mind. Mind is not other than emptiness. So, whereas previously we took form, now we can just say mind. Okay, keep it simple initially. So the person is empty. Emptiness is the person. The person is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than the person. This is just implied with these four profundities. Okay, it's just implied. It's not spelled out. We only have form. Form is empty, emptiness is form. But implied in that is also the person. It's merely labeled, doesn't exist in and of itself. Therefore, the second profundity, the person can exist. And its lack of inherent existence is not separate from the person. Just as the gold The gold is the underlying ingredient of a gold coin. Emptiness is the underlying characteristic of the I, and they don't exist separately. And still, nominally, they're different. So this can be applied to the person. It can be applied to form. So form is being spelled out here, the body. And it can be applied to the mind. Now, what the Buddha does in the Sutra through Avalokiteshvara, he doesn't just say the I is merely labeled on the basis of mind and body, and also mind and body are merely labeled on their parts. No, he takes the mind and divides it further into 4 aggregates. 1 aggregate is the body. 4 aggregates are mainly mental or connected to the mental. So, in a very odd way, he takes number 1, the basic function of the mind. That's the main mind from the point of view of the basic function. And I said that before, I'm just repeating it, but when we studied, we heard it again and again, and it just helps for it to sink deeper, so we'll understand it eventually. And you probably have understood it already, but just for those who haven't. So we talk about the mind as having the basic function of perceiving something, of apprehending something. That is the basic function of the mind. In fact, we define the mind based on that function. It is clear, something appears to it, an object, so it has an object. When you say it is clear, you're basically saying the mind has an object. And it's knowing, you're saying, and it does something with that object. So saying clear and knowing is another way of saying the mind is an agent that has an object which appears to it and which the mind knows, does something with it. Okay? And that is the basic function of every mind, that the mind is at least aware of something. Okay. That being the case, that's the main function of the mind. And from the point of view of that function, we talk about main mind. But it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. Because when I ask you to think about the red flower, and all of you can tell me, yes, a red flower appears when I think about it, even while listening to me, you can all think about the red flower. It appears to your mental consciousness while your sense consciousnesses see my body, hear my voice, and even your mental consciousness briefly recognizes what I say. Still, your mental consciousness can switch very quickly back and forth between flower appearing, what is the voice saying? So quickly that it seems you have 2 minds active at the same time. You may have, but it's not necessary. It is also possible that you perceive the flower for a few seconds and then you switch back to what I say. Now, I just want you to be aware of the mind that perceives the red flower. In other words, that thinks about the red flower, that remembers the red flower. Okay, so to that mind, the red flower appears. Okay, now that's not all that happens. That is just the main function of the mind. But if I ask you to stop listening to me, what I'm saying, just meditate on the flower. You've done that with Geshe yesterday on Friday. If I ask you to merely think about the flower, if, for instance, red roses are your favorite flowers, and seeing a red rose may make you really happy. So watch your own mind. You have the appearance of the rose. And now, okay, it's difficult to see the surface to which it appears. That is difficult. But we can understand the surface, the agent that is labeled based on the conventional mind, that is labeled based on what appears to it and what it does, by trying to recognize the appearance and the apprehension, the cognition of that flower. But there's more happening. There's a feeling in that moment. You may feel pleased, that mind, thinking about the flower, there's a sense of well-being. If it's an object you think is beautiful, right? I mean, take the example of a beautiful scene, beautiful scenery, that when you see it makes you happy. Like when I open my computer, they sometimes have these beautiful sceneries, and I catch myself thinking, oh, how nice. So the mind that takes in that scenery has a pleasant feeling. And sometimes there are pictures on the screen, it's not the screensaver thing, but other pictures that are unpleasant, so an unpleasant feeling arises. So you watch your own mind perceive not just the appearance, in this case of the red flower, not just, you don't just become aware that the mind knows the flower, but you can also become aware of a certain feeling that arises with that mind. Okay, again, through introspection, that is through mindfulness of your own mind. Okay, so in that way you recognize feeling. But you can also recognize when you stay with this object, when the mind takes in this object, it actually discerns, it discriminates. The mind is able to discriminate between this part of the flower and the lower part of the flower, the color, the shape. How do we know that? Because if later on I ask you, when you thought about this flower, what was the color, what was the shape, you're able to recall. Why? Because the mind that thought about the flower was able to discern between the shape and color. It took in the different aspects. That is the mental factor of discernment. So here you go. You recognize not only the mind through the appearance of the red flower, and it's lovely. You don't want to put it in front of you because there may be more a sense, oh, my flower just takes in the flower that I perceive, that's the one out there, and it just takes it in. You become less aware of the appearance to your mind because there's a sense it's that flower right there that I perceive. No, really, in a sense, it's just the appearance because the flower is over here and your mind is over there, which is why we take the example of thinking about the flower, because there's no flower. There is no flower right now that you could point out in front of you, and you can still make it appear. Okay, so that is the clear aspect of your mind, that object appearing to it. And then there's a feeling, and there's discernment, and of course there's the perception itself. And there are all these other aspects of the mind. There are other mental factors. You may be concentrated in that moment, so you're very focused on it. You have the aspect of the mind being drawn towards it. That's mental intention. The mind has made contact with the object in the first place through the appearance. Again, that is a mental factor. Those are all mental functions that happen at the same time, and they're part of the compositional factor. Okay, and of course, imprints, habits, the kind of red flower. If I ask you to think of a red flower, and I'm not showing you a particular red flower, you probably all have different red flowers appearing to your mind, right? One's got a tulip, the other one got a rose. That's because of the imprints that red flowers we've seen in the past, or flowers we've seen in the past, that we associate now, mainly that we choose as a representative for a red flower that now appears to us. That's because of imprints, because of habits in the past, or because of residues left in the mind from the past. Those are all part of compositional factors. So you can see through the 5 aggregates, when you learn about them, that of course feeling is very important. Feeling is crucial. Why? Because, well, we act in the world, our whole reactions are all based on our feelings. Discernment helps us to make sense of things. And then, of course, there's the main function of just perceiving its object. That's the main mind. And all these other mental factors, which are part of the category compositional factor. having understood the mind in that way, having understood that surface on which something appears and that now knows its object, well, that also doesn't exist inherently. It is merely labeled, as I said earlier, on the basis of its object, on the basis of its activity, its function, based on other characteristics, based on moments in time, because for a mind to be active, it needs some moments. You can't just have one tiny moment and think about a flower. It takes a few moments, and each of these individual moments are part of that mind, which when they're put together, they form an awareness thinking about a flower. None of those moments is that awareness we're talking about, because that awareness, let's say it's made of 30 seconds, right? None of those seconds is the mind that is made of 30 seconds, because a mind that is made of 30 seconds must be longer than one single second. So based on those moments in time, we label mind thinking about a flower, right? So none of those moments are the mind thinking about the flower that lasts for 30 seconds in that case. So each of those, none of those moments are that particular mind, but that particular mind as a continuum was labeled based on those parts that are not it. So it doesn't exist inherently. It was merely labeled on the basis of an appearance to it, on the basis of the mind doing something with it. All this, so the appearance of the red flower, then moments in time when a perception took place, which in combination, after those 30 moments, when we are able, or throughout these 30 moments, in combination, we're able to perceive the flower. Well, none of those being the mind thinking about the flower, but we label on the basis of that, we label flower. Right? Okay? Not flower. Sorry, we don't label flower. Based on that mind, we label mind thinking about flower. Okay? And then when you take that feeling aspect of it, which experiences a pleasant feeling, for instance, having the flower appear, perceiving the flower, doing something with it, apprehending the flower, being aware of it, based on experiencing a sense of well-being, while at the same time perceiving the flower, that agent we label as feeling, which of course is not to be separated from the mind just perceiving the flower. It's just taking it from a different aspect. Just as you can have shear, for instance, and label shear the cook, and shear the technician, and shear the teacher, and shear the student, same person, but from different aspects, depending on the function that is performed, we give them different names. All right, so therefore, what it says in the text is form is empty, emptiness is form, etc. And then same is true, and I need to open my text here now. The same here is true for feeling, for discernment or discrimination. Sorry, just a second, I want to open it. Take a second. Text. Oh yes, here it is. Emptiness is not other than form, etc. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Okay, so what makes you as a person merely labeled? Your body, merely labeled. Your mind, merely labeled. All these minds, all these different minds, all day long, feelings, emotions, worries, anxiety, anger, only labeled. Nothing solid there to be found. Nothing solid there to really be worried about. What a relief. Okay, initially there's like, no, why have I been doing all this? I've worked so hard. Don't take away my eye. Don't take away my mind and body. I've held on to those. I worked for them. There's fear of losing them. But eventually that fear, and that's a good fear actually, eventually that fear will go away and they'll be like, oh, why didn't I recognize that earlier? Right? There's relief, and that is called liberation. Right? There's no external liberation. There's the understanding, the thing I was so worried about, my reputation, my body, my shape, my size, my career, there is no I on which you can hang on these different labels. There's no inherent I that you can, like hooks. There's a sense we have an I here and you can hook onto them the label successful, kind, hardworking, liked everywhere. No, you can't find the I, first of all, to hang it onto. But even your kindness doesn't exist inherently. Your anger doesn't exist inherently. They exist merely conventionally. And that's enough for them to exist. So our exaggerated way of responding to things, I can't bear someone abuses me, someone insults me, that falls away. And there's a reasonable response. And love and compassion actually find a place in our mind. We're not so preoccupied with gratifying the I and looking after the I. That's when the wisdom allows for compassion, etc., to come in. All right, but initially, we only understand that conceptually. Initially, it's about knowing about this. We haven't fully experienced the emptiness of our mind and body. And the next stage is then to move away from the level on which we initially understand emptiness. Remember, I talked about this last time. I keep going back to the emptiness itself. But of course, it's also important to understand the mind, the type of mind, although only conventionally existent, but still existent nonetheless, that now perceives this object emptiness. And I've actually promised last time, but I realize I still haven't made it. To start this part, Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Those are 8 profundities that are even harder to understand than form is empty, emptiness is form. So it takes a while. This is truly the most essential part, or the most difficult part of this sutra. And later on, it's just going through different objects and basically saying you can apply the same to form, feeling, discrimination, consciousness, eye, ear, nose, etc., just becoming familiar with it. So that's why I keep sticking with this, because there's still more to be said. Okay, but before we start meditating, and our meditation will again revolve around what we did today. I'm just trying to see. Yes, I don't think I've left anything out that I wanted to mention again about what Geshe said. So maybe one aspect that I haven't mentioned yet, Geshe talked a lot about the mind. Of course, as part of his lectures on the emptiness of mind, which we're also at right now, emptiness of feeling, emptiness of discrimination, of main mind, and so forth. But before we can understand the emptiness, we need to understand the basis, like the emptiness of what. And Geshe so beautifully explained the meaning of clear, that something can appear to it. It has to have a sense, there must be some clarity there, because otherwise it couldn't appear, using the metaphor of material things. But he also used the metaphor saying also used the word luminous, because the Tibetan word clear can also mean luminous. So the mind must have a property that light has too, right? It must share. So the metaphor is again light, just because the function of the mind is similar to that of light. In that, Geshe used the example of a beautiful flower garden. If it wasn't for the light, the flowers could not be seen. If there's no light, the flowers cannot be seen. So in the same way, when you think of the flowers appearing to the mind, there must be some internal luminosity, some internal light, if you like, And no wonder we talk about the clear light mind, etc. So there must be this kind of a luminosity, because otherwise nothing could appear to it. Okay, so it's like if your mind is compared to a mirror, and part of that mirror is that light that it has. So of course it's not a mirror, and you don't have a mirror that has as part of its entity light. You need an external source of light. But the mind is such, it is like a mirror and a light. Okay, in that anything can appear to it, and that appearance is noticeable, right? It's noticeable in that the mind provides that light, that luminosity. Oh gosh, I keep going back to physical objects. Of course, it's hard to explain it other than using physical terminology, but of course, be aware it's just a metaphor. Great. So that was all I wanted to mention before maybe take a question or two. I don't know whether you have, but if you do, there's an opportunity now. Yes, Leora, Price, you can just unmute. Yes. Can you unmute your...
Yeah, now I mute. I have two questions actually. One is that I have difficulty with the saying about the surface of the mind, because it makes me think that there is a surface and something under.
Mm-hmm.
It's better for me to feel, understand, imagine that something more abstract, more
Mm-hmm.
like a cloud, I don't know, something
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't have something outside, inside, up or down.
Mm-hmm.
Also with the word agent, it makes me, agent is something in the middle that is doing this and making contact with that. But the mind, if I say the flower, for example,
Mm-hmm.
flower becomes a part of the mind. It's not on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of this abstract thing that is the mind.
Mm-hmm.
One question.
Mm-hmm.
Second one, when you talked about how understanding this emptiness bring us to compassion, when everything become loose and I don't. So my question is when I have like realized that everything is so loose and empty, is because I've I looked inside.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion is looking outside. No?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there is a swift, how you say,
Switch.
and switch
Uh-huh.
direction of looking. So how
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not naturally going, because first I was analyzing inside, and then I have to think about others.
Mm.
Passion will take place because I am not so existing. So it's easier to make space for others. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is the two questions.
Okay. Well, number one, the surface, the agent. No, there may not be helpful ideas. I mean, I think the word agent, I've also like to use that because when we use adjectives such as clear and functions such as knowing, we may get lost in the sense there's just some clarity and some knowing. There's some clarity here and some knowing there. And to bring it together and explain that to be the mind just makes it difficult. So the word agent, well, in a way, our mind is that which allows us to communicate with the outside. So in the sense like that agent that does that, etc. But again, you need to find a term that works best for you. So it is sometimes used because our notion of what the mind is keeps changing. And if we go into the wrong direction, certain words may temporarily bring us back in the right direction until we need to let go of them again and move on to finally, get to where we want to go. And I agree with you, the word space is usually better because it's got much more the sense of anything is possible, this vastness. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you don't find words such as surface and agent really in the scriptures. I think temporarily they may help us. Okay? But then when you find it's time to let go of them, then then that's your decision, and I think that's a good decision then. Secondly, about compassion, well, outside and inside, that divide is not as great as it seems, right? So like me here and others there, of course, that is also, we can see ourselves as part of others. Instead of thinking me here and others there, others are part of me. And then again, it's not like looking at others, it's like looking at yourself in a sense, right? Because they're just part of you and you are part of them. But what we do with our misapprehension of the I, we create a separation between ourselves and others that doesn't exist in that way. There's only a conventional, there's a conventional I and others. And I like the example of mothers when they feel that their children are just an extension of themselves, right? I mean, I've heard my mom say that, and I was like, yuck. And she's like, but you're me. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not you. I felt very, especially as a teenager, I never liked to say that. But now I get it. That was just her emotional sense of, you're part of me, and your happiness is like my own happiness. You're just an extension of me. That is a way. And I think that this homeless, the Dalai Lama, for instance, all of us are just an extension of him, and our happiness is just as important as his own happiness, because he doesn't feel like I'm over here, the Dalai Lama, and you're over there. I'm pretty sure his brain is totally active with any suffering he recognizes. In our case, it's like it's all happening in his brain, is all highlighting right away, without of course feeling it in the same way as we do, but having that understanding and that notion and that empathy. So there's much more of a sense of like, I'm just part of all this, and I have finally recognized that I'm not that different bubble which keeps me so busy and so preoccupied and so worried, and that I'm part of everyone else. And now everyone else is still under the control of this fantasy that they are on their own and totally separate entities, and they have to prove they're special and they have to be special. I mean, all this pressure. No, it's gone. I no longer feel that. And now I can focus on showing others that this is what we can actually experience. There's real peace. Lyra, does that help a little bit? The sense of like,
yeah, a little, because still, when we read the Heart Sutra, so really think this is empty, this is empty, this is empty, mind and all its part, and it makes me really not as solid as I was normally thinking and feeling, and then feeling that I'm not as I was thinking. I feel it's okay, but now I have to do like a shift and think about others. And then I can feel what you said, that we are connected because I'm not what I thought. But I have to do a change in my projector, let's say.
Well, you have to move away from the ultimate level to the conventional level. When it says there's no I, no you.
Maybe. Yes.
But that's all right. Yes. Understand that they are just different aspects of the same thing, right? So yes, you're right. On an ultimate level, it's no eye, no ear, no nose. But conventionally, there is no eye, no ear, no nose. It's not saying that there's not an interdependent ear, eye, and ear, and nose. There's just no independent one. There's an interdependent one. So to leave aside with no eye, you're really just saying that characteristic of being independent and solidly there, that is not there. But the I is there because it exists as an interdependent phenomenon. So you're basically switching away from negating a characteristic as never existed by focusing on the characteristics that do exist.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Are there more questions?
Yeah, we have one from Varda.
One from Varda? Did you say Varda?
Yeah, Varda.
Yes, please go ahead, Varda.
Sorry, I can't put the camera on me.
That's okay, no problem. I can hear you.
Yeah, I wrote it down because I was the last days after Geshe teaching,
Yes.
I was looking in everything I could find about the difference between seeing the flower with my eyes
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the flower when I close my eyes and I meditate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I came in the text with the same thing that you said, that the object only appears, but then it was written, but it is not ascertained. And I couldn't remember what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain, or it's too much and for now?
No, it's okay. I can, yes, there are types of mind. There is a sense of awareness. There's an aspect of awareness, but it's so weak that later on you do not remember. In other words, there's no mental consciousness that registers what you've seen. So actually right now your sense consciousnesses, they take in everything. Okay, but so the appearance is still there, and there is a slight aspect of like the mind holding on to the object, but there is no knowing. So not every mind knows. When we say the mind is clear and knowing, there's two interpretations of that. One is every mind has the potential to know, but if the causes and conditions for it to know something are not present, it may not be able to do it in that moment. That's one interpretation. So having the potential, the ability to know, but because of some wrong view or being preoccupied with something else, the mind doesn't know. Okay. So for instance, if there's now a noise outside and I'm preoccupied talking to you, I'm preoccupied looking at you. So my ear consciousness is there. The sound appears to my ear consciousness. There is even some awareness there, but the ear consciousness doesn't know the sound. It doesn't know it. It doesn't register, if you like. It doesn't know. And therefore, on a mental level, there's not the thought sound, doesn't arise. Which is why later on, I have no recollection of the sound. So the mind did something, but it didn't get through to the mental consciousness. Okay, so the sense consciousnesses, they have something appear to it, but that's not ascertained, that is not cognized by a mental consciousness. We don't even know our mental consciousness. When we take in the sense objects, there's a short moment just registering, okay? So we register, and then we can actually access it with memory. If it's an awareness to which the object appears, but is not ascertained, later on with that mental consciousness, we have no recollection of it.
So when I'm in a meditation and the flower will appear to my mind,
that is ascertained. And awareness to which
that it appears, the sentence says in the book, in the mind and in Tibetan Buddhism, it says it appears, the object appears, but is not ascertained.
That's not possible, Valda, because only a sense consciousness, or there's a particular mental consciousness that is very, very brief, yeah, but that's not even accepted in the highest school. In the Satantrika school, they say that you have sense consciousnesses that can be awarenesses to which the object appears but is not ascertained. And then they say before you can have a mental consciousness that is a conceptual mind, you have a very short moment of a direct appearance to the mental consciousness. And that is not ascertained, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking basically about a conceptual mind. The ascertaining mind is a conceptual mind. And anyway, in the Prasangika school, that very short moment of a direct perceiving mental consciousness is not even accepted. And we're here in the Prasangika school.
I thought it was.
No. The Mind in Tibetan Buddhism by Lati Rinpoche, that was one of the books Geshe I recommended. It's from the point of view of the Satantrika school, which is great and very helpful, but we need to know which aspects can we take on from that book and which can we not. So it's 99.9% of what's in this book can be accepted, but there are a few differences between the Prasangika, and one difference is that mental consciousness, which is a direct perceiver, if you know that term.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then that's an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained, but the Prasangika doesn't accept that direct perceiver.
I thought it was, so I look again. Thank you.
Yeah. sure, you're welcome. All right, okay, 2 questions, and there's no time for more. Sorry, time always goes so quickly. But for those of you who may want to go through the Heart Sutra more faster, well, unfortunately, it's not going to happen, because I find it's much more important to go more thoroughly, especially about this important part. But of course, also to provide you, hopefully, and of course, Geshe does a so much better job to provide you with the tools to meditate on this. Okay, so let's do again that meditation on the red flower one last time. So one last time to look at it, and whatever, it doesn't have to be this particular flower. So I would like you to meditate specifically now on the emptiness of feeling and discernment. Okay, all right, so let's do this. We're a little bit over time, but after I saw the time with Geshe, I feel more confident to go over time, because he was also a little longer. And of course, you can always leave the session. I'm sure some people have done that. So let's do a little bit of meditation. First, we start with breathing. And as Geshe kindly reminded us, I would say a moment something about compassion. So we make sure the basis is compassion, and then I lead you through the meditation. Just a little bit of breathing. And then take a moment to think that the following analytical meditation, I will do this for it to become a cause to relieve the suffering of sentient beings. May this help me to reduce other people's misery and problems. And then bring to mind a red flower. A beautiful, fresh red flower. Allow for it to appear to your mind. And then also imagine that this thought of the flower generates pleasure in your mind. There's a sense of peace. While the flower appears to you. At the same time, start to discern the flower. Visualize it from different angles. Become aware of its color, its leaves, its size, its smell. And now shift your attention away from the appearance and the function and instead focus on the space-like agent that is aware of that flower. Now pay special attention to the mental function or mental factor of feeling. That is the awareness from the point of view of experiencing a pleasant emotion while the flower appears. So that mental factor called feeling is empty. It does not exist independently. But is merely labeled. In many different aspects. That are not the feeling. The feeling is merely imputed on the basis of moments in time, on the basis of an appearance, of an object, the basis of the function of being aware of the object. So therefore, emptiness is feeling. Which means that feeling is only possible because it lacks independent existence. And feeling is no other than emptiness. Since the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence and feeling cannot be separated. And emptiness is no other than feeling, which means that they're still nominally different. Feeling and its emptiness are conventionally different. It's understanding that feeling doesn't exist in and of itself inherently. Does it really make sense to be under the control of feeling? In that we crave pleasant feelings and have aversion towards unpleasant ones. And then take to mind discernment. Going back to the appearance of the red flower, to your mental consciousness. And your mental consciousness checking on the different aspects of the flower, distinguishing between its color, shape, smell. which from the perspective of doing just that, distinguishing, is the mental factor of discrimination. And now think that discrimination is empty. It doesn't exist independently or inherently. It cannot be found among its many parts. It's merely labeled on the basis of entities that are not it, that are not discrimination. And so emptiness is discrimination, which means that discrimination is only possible because it lacks independent, inherent existence. And that ultimate aspect of discrimination, it's emptiness. And the conventional aspect, discrimination itself, they're of one nature. Discrimination is no other than emptiness. And emptiness is no other than discrimination. They're just nominally different. And since discernment is merely labeled on the basis of moments that are not it, does it really make sense to believe that I'm right and someone else is wrong? As in, I discern things correctly and another person doesn't. And now spend a few moments just focusing on whichever conclusion you've come to, applying the 4 profundities to your feeling and your discernment or your discrimination. Just allow whatever insight you've gained to sink deeper into your mind. And now to conclude this session today, so let's think that having taken the time to reflect upon the profound meaning of emptiness, having listened to it, thought about it, and meditated on it, may that become one of the causes that help us to generate more heartfelt compassion for ourselves and others. And at the same time, better understanding of ourselves and other phenomena. So then we can activate the true nature of our mind. And become all-knowing, become an all-knowing, fully enlightened Buddha. To be of greatest benefit to ourselves and others. So with this in mind, let's do the dedication prayer. Shir, if you could display the dedication prayer. Okay. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the hopeless find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all the medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and the people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, great. Thank you. Oof, I also did my 20 minutes overtime. So it was lovely to be with you again. Have a great week. And next we will continue with the Heart Sutra. So I hope you bear with me. I know it takes a long time, but there's just a lot to discuss. And now with Geshe's teachings, they're so precious. So I'd like to address some of what he says. Okay, thank you. Shalom. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.